I didn't say a word when my brother walked into the bank with his wife right behind him, both of them dressed like they were heading to brunch. I just watched them from across the lobby and thought, they have no idea what today actually is. That's the thing about people who underestimate you. They never see it coming until it's already done. My name is Maya, and I'm 32 years old. I work as a registered nurse in ICU at a regional hospital in Columbus, Ohio. I do 12-hour overnight shifts, sometimes back-to-back, because that's what it takes when you're building something real from nothing. No inheritance, no safety net, just me, a budget spreadsheet I've kept since I was 24, and a savings account I treated like it was sacred. For 5 years, I set aside money every single month. I skipped vacations. I brought lunch to work in a cooler bag. I drove a 2014 Honda that had a crack in the passenger window for 2 winters because I refused to touch my savings for anything that wasn't the plan. The plan was simple. By the time I turned 33, I would have enough to put a down payment on a home of my own. A place with my name on the deed. Something no one could take from me. I was 3 months away from that goal when I found out my brother Marcus had already taken it. It started with a letter I almost didn't open. It came on a Tuesday in February from a credit monitoring service I had signed up for years ago and mostly forgotten about. I almost threw it in the recycling pile with the takeout menus and the electric bill. But something made me stop. I don't know why. I opened it at my kitchen counter, still in my scrubs at 6:40 in the morning, exhausted from a double shift, and I read the words that made my whole body go still. Your credit score has decreased by 211 points. I read it again, then a third time. I set the letter down very carefully like it might shatter. I pulled up my credit report on my phone and just stood there in the kitchen while everything I had spent 5 years building rearranged itself into something I didn't recognize. There were 2 personal loans I had never applied for, a credit card opened in my name with a balance of $9,000, and a hard inquiry from a lender I had never heard of, dated 4 months earlier, that I had never authorized. My hands were steady. My voice, when I finally spoke, was quiet. I said out loud to no one, Marcus. I didn't know it yet, but I was right. My brother Marcus is 38. He has a landscaping business that has been about to take off for the better part of a decade. He married his wife Renee 6 years ago, and from the beginning, Renee had opinions about money that she was never shy about sharing. Specifically, she had opinions about my money, about how I earned too much to be living the way I was living, about how family shares, about how I was selfish for not helping out more. What that meant in practice was this. Every few months, there was a new ask. Could I cover the business insurance for 1 quarter, just until a big contract came through? Could I co-sign a lease on a cargo van? Could I fund the cost of a professional website, a logo designer, a set of branded uniforms? I said no every time, politely at first, then firmly, then in writing after my therapist told me to start documenting. What I didn't know was that saying no had simply made them more creative. I called a consumer fraud attorney that same Tuesday morning. I didn't call Marcus first. I didn't call my mother. I called a lawyer because I had learned years ago that the moment you tip off the wrong person, evidence disappears and stories get coordinated. The attorney's name was Patricia, and within 40 minutes of me laying out what I'd found, she said something I already knew. This is identity fraud. And based on what you're describing, someone had to have access to a lot of your personal information. Your social security number, your date of birth, your mother's maiden name, your previous address. I knew exactly one person outside of my employer who had all of those things. Marcus had asked for them 2 years earlier when he said he was setting up a family emergency contact binder, a physical folder with everyone's information in case something happened and we needed to act fast. It had seemed thoughtful at the time. Renee had even made a little presentation about it at Easter dinner with printed tabs and a cover sheet. My mother said it was the most organized thing Marcus had ever done in his life, and everyone laughed. I had handed over every piece of information he asked for without a second thought. Patricia told me not to confront Marcus yet. She told me not to change my passwords, not to alert the lenders, not to do anything that might signal I was aware. She said, let them think it's still quiet. Let me start pulling the threads. So that's what I did. I went home. I slept for 4 hours. I went back to work. And every single day for the next 6 weeks, I acted like nothing was wrong. That was the hardest part, not the anger, not the grief. And there was grief, the specific kind that comes from realizing someone you loved took something from you deliberately. Planned it out, used your own trust as the instrument. The hardest part was sitting across from Marcus at my mother's house for Sunday dinner 2 weeks later, watching him pass the bread rolls and ask how my patients were doing, and not letting a single thing show on my face. Renee talked about the business the whole meal. A new contract was coming. A landscaping deal for a corporate office park. They just needed to get through the next couple of months. My mother nodded and made sympathetic sounds, and I ate my food and said nothing. Under the table, my left hand was a fist. What Patricia found over those 6 weeks was worse than I had expected, and I had already expected the worst. The 2 personal loans, one for $18,000, one for $11,000, had been taken out using my name, my social security number, and a set of pay stubs that had been digitally altered to show my income going directly to an account that was not mine. The credit card had been opened online. The billing address was a P.O. box in a suburb 20 minutes from where Marcus and Renee lived. The IP address on the account application traced back to a device registered at their home address. They hadn't even used a VPN. Patricia put me in touch with a contact at the Federal Trade Commission, and we filed the identity theft report. We also contacted the fraud departments of both lending institutions. At this point, I had documentation, the IP trace, the altered pay stubs, the timeline showing I was working overnight shifts at the hospital on the nights the applications were submitted. I had my badge and records. I had security footage from the parking garage. And then Patricia found the spreadsheet. It came through discovery from one of the lenders who had flagged the account during the fraud investigation and handed over a file Marcus had apparently uploaded as supporting documentation when he applied for the larger loan. The file was titled simply, Family Balance, Maya. I opened it on Patricia's laptop in her office. It was a spreadsheet. 8 columns, going back 11 years. Every single thing Marcus and Renee believed I owed them. Documented in rows with dates and dollar amounts. Not loans, not requests. A ledger of what they had decided, between themselves, without ever telling me, that I was responsible for paying back. Christmas dinner at their house in 2019. My share of the grocery costs, $312. The time Marcus helped me move apartments in 2018, $200 for his time in the rental truck. My portion of our mother's birthday dinner in 2021, split not evenly, but based on what they decided my income could cover, $488. Health insurance premiums from a plan I was on through my father's employer when I was 19 years old and still in nursing school before I had my own coverage, over $3,000 across 2.5 years. The total at the bottom of the spreadsheet, in bold, $41,700. Underneath it, in a cell that had been highlighted in yellow, Renee had typed, amount recovered to date, $29,000. They weren't done. I sat in Patricia's office for a long moment after I finished reading. She didn't say anything. She let me sit with it. Then I closed the laptop and I said, what do we do next? She told me what we needed. A signed admission or a moment of documented self-incrimination. The IP trace and the pay stubs were strong, but financial fraud cases move slowly and defense attorneys have room to introduce doubt. What would make this airtight, she said, was getting Marcus or Renee to confirm, on record, in some verifiable way, that they had knowingly done this. I thought about it for 3 days. And then I had an idea. I called Marcus on a Wednesday afternoon. Warm voice. Easy tone. I told him I'd been thinking about things and I felt like we'd been distant lately. I said I wanted to do something for him and Renee. Something concrete. I had heard they were going through a hard stretch financially, and I wanted to help, but I needed to understand the full picture first. Could we sit down together? All 3 of us, maybe at a neutral location? Marcus said yes before I even finished the sentence. I suggested the conference room at my bank. I told him I wanted to talk about options, maybe something structured where I could be sure the money was going toward the business and not just floating. He said that sounded great. He asked if Renee could come. I said of course. I spent the night before the meeting sitting at my kitchen table, not sleeping, not anxious, just very, very still. I had a glass of water. I had all my documents in a folder in front of me. At some point around 2 a.m, I thought about those pay stubs they had altered. My name on a document I hadn't touched. My income warped into something that fit their plan. And I felt the full weight of what they had done settle into my chest. Not rage. Something quieter and colder than rage. The kind of feeling that doesn't go away until the thing is finished. I got up, washed my face, and went to bed. The morning of the meeting, I arrived at the bank 20 minutes early. Patricia was already there. So was the bank's fraud investigator, a woman named Delphine who had been part of the case for 3 weeks, and who I liked immediately because she had a way of being very calm in a room that made other people feel like the walls were closing in. There was also a contact from the district attorney's office, a man named Garrett, who looked approximately 12 years old and said almost nothing the entire time, which I later learned was intentional. We had arranged the room simply: a round table, 4 chairs, a folder at each seat, coffee that no one was going to drink. Marcus and Renee arrived 8 minutes late. Marcus was in a button-down, Renee in a blazer, both of them looking like they had dressed for something they expected to go well. Marcus hugged me. Actually hugged me. I let him. Renee smiled and said it was good to see me, and I said it was good to see her too, and I meant neither of those things, and I suspect she did not either. They sat down. They looked at Patricia and Delphine and Garrett, and the introductions were made, and I watched Renee's expression go very carefully neutral. Marcus shifted in his seat. I opened the meeting. I told them I had recently become aware of some unusual activity connected to my financial accounts and my credit history. I said I had been working with my attorney and with the bank to understand what had happened. I said I wanted to give them the opportunity to explain anything they might know before the formal process moved forward. Renee said very smoothly that they didn't know anything about any unusual activity. Marcus nodded. I slid the spreadsheet across the table. The silence that followed was the kind that has weight to it. I watched Marcus look at the document. I watched the color leave his face in a way that reminded me of a tide going out very fast. Renee put her hand on the folder and did not open it, and that told me everything. Patricia said quietly that we had a number of questions and that anything they said in this room was being documented. She said they were welcome to have their own attorney present and that if they wanted to pause the meeting and make a call, we would wait. Marcus said, and I will remember this for the rest of my life. I can explain. He said they had only been trying to bridge a gap. He said the business was going to come through. He said it wasn't stealing because family doesn't steal from family. He said I had always had more than enough and that I didn't even notice when money moved. Renee said nothing. She was watching me. I looked at my brother and I said, very evenly, "Did you submit a loan application in my name without my knowledge or consent?" He looked at the table. "Marcus, did you?" He said yes. Garrett, the attorney from the DA's office who had said approximately 4 words the entire meeting, picked up his pen. What followed was not dramatic. There was no shouting, no overturned chairs. Marcus kept talking. He had convinced himself, genuinely, that he would be able to explain his way to forgiveness, and he did not stop trying until Patricia interrupted and told him clearly that he needed to stop speaking without counsel present. Renee had gone completely still. She looked like a person calculating how far the door was. The investigation that followed took 4 months. Marcus was charged with identity theft, wire fraud, and falsifying financial documents. Renee was charged alongside him. Both loans were declared fraudulent. My credit was restored. The money I had saved, every cent of those 5 years of overnight shifts and packed lunches and the car with the cracked window, was still there, untouched in my account, because I had found out before they had gotten to it. My mother called me the night the charges were announced. She cried. She asked me why I hadn't told her what was happening. She asked if I could have handled it differently. I told her I loved her. I told her I was sorry she was hurting. And then I told her something I had been carrying for a long time, quietly, through every Sunday dinner, and every past bread roll, and every moment I sat across from my brother, and felt the specific weight of what betrayal looks like when it's wearing a familiar face. I told her that protecting myself had never required her permission. She was quiet after that. We ended the call without resolution, and I sat in my apartment and looked at the window where the city was going dark. And I felt something that wasn't quite peace, but was the next best thing: clarity. The plea agreement was finalized on a Thursday afternoon in October. Marcus received 3 years probation and mandatory restitution. Renee received the same. Their attorney argued for leniency based on family circumstances. The judge noted the premeditated nature of the scheme, the spreadsheet, the Alder documents, the P.O. box, the IP address, and she was not moved. I was not in the courtroom. I had already said everything I needed to say. There's a thing that happens after something like this, a kind of slow unwinding that no one tells you about. You spend so long in a state of careful alertness, watching your words, watching your face, watching what you let show, that when it's finally over, the stillness feels strange, like a sound you've gotten used to suddenly stopping. I took a week off work. I drove out to a state park 2 hours from Columbus with a thermos of coffee and walked until I couldn't see the parking lot anymore. I sat on a rock above a creek, and I thought about the spreadsheet, about the tab labeled Family Balance, Maya, about the 11 years of invented debt that two people had been carrying around in a folder, adding to it, waiting. I thought about the version of myself who handed over her social security number at Easter dinner because she thought her family was building something together. I didn't hate her. She had trusted the wrong people, which is a thing that happens and which is not a character flaw. It's just a thing that happens. My savings goal was met in the spring, 4 months after the case closed. I made an offer on a house, a small house, 3 bedrooms, a yard with a half-dead apple tree that the inspector told me would probably not survive another winter. I bought it anyway. I signed the papers on a Friday morning and drove home through a light rain and stood in the backyard of a house that had my name on the deed, just mine. And I looked at that tree for a long time. I think it's going to be fine. I think with enough time and the right conditions, most things that look half dead aren't actually done yet. I go back to work on Monday. 12-hour overnight shift, same as always. I bring my lunch in the same cooler bag. The Honda has a new window now. Some people have asked me since all of this happened whether I regret how I handled it, whether I should have confronted Marcus privately first, given him a chance to make it right before involving attorneys and the district attorney's office and a fraud investigator named Delphine, who I genuinely hope is doing well. My answer is always the same. He had already taken $29,000. He had a spreadsheet with 12 more thousand to go. A private conversation was not going to give me back what was already gone, and it was not going to stop what was still coming. What stopped it was documentation, and a lawyer, and a round table in a conference room. And the moment my brother looked at his own spreadsheet and said I can explain and chose, in that instant, to confirm everything. He did me that favor. I didn't even have to ask. There's something I've learned about the people who believe they can take from you without consequence. They rely on a very specific thing, the assumption that you will prioritize the relationship over the truth, that you love them enough to swallow it, that the version of yourself who handed over her social security number at Easter dinner, trusting, patient, unwilling to make things uncomfortable, is the only version of you that exists. They forget that the same person who works 12-hour overnight shifts and packs her own lunch and drives a car with a cracked window for 2 winters is also, underneath all of that, extremely patient and extremely good at waiting for the right moment. They miscalculated, and I pay for my silence with 5 years of careful work and a house with a half-dead apple tree. And I have decided that's a fair price for the life I'm building now. Closure, I found, is not a conversation. It's not an apology, and it's not a moment where the other person finally understands what they did. It's something you build yourself, quietly, with the same discipline you used to build everything else. It's the document folder, the attorney's card, the meeting room with the coffee no one drinks. It's knowing that the account they were counting on, the one they had been quietly draining for 11 years in a spreadsheet they thought no one would ever see, is still full. And it's yours.